We're doing here Orchot Tzaddikim. Orchot Tzaddikim is translated into English as the path of the, or the ways of the righteous, as opposed to the path of the just. The path of the just is perhaps more well known. That was written by the Ramchal, and but this is a different book. It's called Orchot Tzaddikim. Not Mesilas Yesharim. Mesilas Yesharim is the one written by the Ramchal, which is translated as the path of the righteous. This is the path of the just. This is the ways of the righteous. Orchot Tzaddikim, and it goes through different character traits, usually in pairs, positive and negative, in order to help work on correcting ourselves and our personalities and character traits and the like. So we happen to be pretty much near the end of the chapter having to do with meanness. So let's see what the conclusion of this paragraph brings us to. So va'ata, this chapter, va'ata ben adam. Now listen, sir. Ayin al atzmecha v'yischarchek min achzarios. Look into yourself and distance yourself from this quality of being mean and sensitive. Ach tirachem al onim ve'vyonim. Be merciful on the poor and on those who are lacking. V'yonim b'nei beisecha, and you should accept poor people into your home to become like the members of your home. Nowadays, it's not so likely to find people who are so poverty-stricken. I mean, it doesn't mean to say that there's isn't poverty, because of course there is poverty, and the verse itself says that there will always be poverty, at least until the time of the coming of Mashiach and the redemption of the world. There will always be poverty. But more often than not, in the Western world, we don't have poverty to the same extent to which it was in the past. Often, people who are that poor, often there's some problem there. In times of old, just people didn't have really the means to support themselves as they did now, and society and culture and economy wasn't developed to the extent that it was. That plenty of average people just couldn't really support themselves and their families. Nowadays, I think at least it's fair to venture that a high percentage of people who are like really poor and not able to care for themselves it's not for economic reasons. It has to do with other reasons as well, social reasons, health reasons, things like that. So that it's not so advisable just to indiscriminately take people into your home nowadays. Times of old, there were communities, people knew other people, and people who were poor were nevertheless known and considered to be reliable and trustful. But nowadays, you can't really do that. You would be exposing yourself and your family to harm. But that being said, spiritually speaking, there's a lot of poverty out there. And therefore, one of the things that we can do is try and help other people's not only physical, material needs, but also spiritual needs. So I don't mean to say that taking care of one's spiritual needs should take the place of taking one's material needs, but very often today, simultaneously, in the Jewish Orthodox world, there's a big emphasis on taking people in who are interested in learning about Torah, learning about the mitzvos, learning about God, and things like that. And even here in the yeshiva, there's a great degree of real hospitality, really, accepting people in, giving them a place to stay and food, and giving them an opportunity to learn if they'd like to. And that's also taking care of people's needs. Man does not live on bread alone, the Torah says, which means that our existence is not just a physical existence, an existence which is geared towards fulfilling one's physical needs alone. People have emotional, intellectual, and spiritual needs as well. So the Torah is interested in fulfilling those needs too. But the point is not to be insensitive and not to be callous, not to be thinking only about yourselves, but we should be thinking about how we can help other people in whatever those needs might be. I'm pointing out here not only physical, but also spiritual as well. Turning up to the top of page Samach, the sages, our sages of blessed memory said, God will give you mercy and have mercy over you. The implication is almost like it could be manifold. God will give mercy to you and have mercy over you. or God will be merciful over you, and therefore you shall be merciful. And on this we say, Kol marachem al abrios, anybody who is merciful on God's creations, merachem min alav min hashamayim, so they have mercy on him from above. Lechen al tisalek me'alecha harachamim, therefore don't take from upon yourself, don't take off yourself mercy. Guard yourself, because a person can become very easily calloused and very easily kind of work into a type of routine where I'm only interested in taking care of my needs and the needs of people who are immediately dependent on me. And other people, if I'm interested, it's only of a secondary interest and only if it works for me. But a person does that, generally over time, will become callous entirely to other people's needs. So it's very important, as much as possible, to be thinking about, right, what does he need? What can I do for that person? In what way does that person need help? Thinking about the needs of other people. Again, it's not just giving a person charity, right? It's fulfilling a need for a person. He needs a place to stay. He needs a kind word. He needs the words of encouragement. He needs some attention, whatever the case may be. Sometimes he needs reprimanding. That's also a need that has to be taken care of sometimes. The point is to be aware of what other people's needs are. King Solomon said in his wisdom, Pen titen lacherim hodecha ushenosecha laachzori. He's basically warning a person from spending his years, in this type of meanness, pettiness, where he's not really concerned about others. But I'm not quite sure without seeing the verse in context. Vizar ben and nekama, and a person should also be careful from taking vengeance. Hayotzes min achzarios, which also comes from being mean. Achim tirtze liinoke meoivecha, if a person has a desire to take vengeance from his enemies, tosif malos tovos v'seilech bedarke yesharim ubezei tinokem misonecha. Rather than taking vengeance upon this person, what you should do is perfect yourself, perfect yourself, work on yourself, improve yourself, and that would be, he says, a greater degree of vengeance. A person thinks badly of you, says something evilly of you, puts you down, embarrasses you, so obviously your natural inclination would be to take vengeance against that person. You'll put him in his place. You'll do back to him what he did to you. But what he's saying here is that very often a person can, if he's going to take vengeance, and he shouldn't, but if he's going to take vengeance, then he should do so by making himself a better person. That's just going to make that person suffer even more. So ultimately the person's going to have to say, well, if my abusing him is causing him to be a better person, and that gets from me anger inside because I'm only seeing the more I heap, let's say, abuse upon this person, he just corrects himself and perfects himself more and more, the more it's going to eat me up. So actually it would be better for me to stop complimenting him. But if you're going to take vengeance, and he's not saying you should, but if you're going to take vengeance by making yourself better, not by taking vengeance against that person. Because ultimately what you're doing is you're going to cause this person to feel bad about your improvement. And on your good name. And he'll be upset about hearing the good news, the good word, the good rumors about you. Again, he's not saying you should take vengeance, and he's just saying that if you do, then you should do it in this way. But if you then do nasty and evil things, and you respond to this person in kind, so he'll be happy because he's drawing you into being a jerk like him. You're actually, and then in this way he takes even further vengeance against you. He draws you into an argument. He causes you to act in a foolish, nonsensical, rude and crude way, and then he's happy that he's been able to draw you down. If you'd like to have mercy over your children, be merciful towards your relatives, and to give them great degrees of honor and respect, the best way to do that would be through learning Torah. And by doing good deeds, and being charitable to others. That's an interesting point, probably, perhaps for many of us who, let's say, our close family members and friends might not consider our being involved in Torah to be the greatest honor for them or their family. But the truth is that it's true that for most people it's usually very difficult for parents and close family members and friends and boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever, to accept the person's becoming more interested in Judaism. Because it does involve a big change in life, a big change in lifestyle, and there are a lot of prejudices and misunderstandings between people who aren't religious and those who are. So people don't necessarily appreciate the value of maybe somebody's new interest in Judaism and Jewish studies and things like that. But usually over time, if it's a normal, stable, healthy person, the positive qualities of the Torah become apparent over time in the way the person speaks, in the ideas that the person expresses, in the way the person behaves, so that over time, even if those loved ones don't agree with what he's doing, at least their anger, their animosity, their suspicion is diffused. And therefore, ultimately, they might even feel a certain degree of respect, for this person. Well, the point is that, over time, usually a person who gets married, has children, has a nice, healthy lifestyle. And even if in these people's eyes it's not the most ideal, at least it's not something as negative as they thought it was initially. And it can ultimately become a point of pride in the family. I mean, I know of situations where, let's say, modern secular Jewish families put a lot of emphasis on raising their kids Jewishly, which means sending them to law school or to medical school. And the children went ahead and were very observant secular Jews by becoming doctors and lawyers. And but if they did get married, the marriages didn't last, and often it was to non-Jews, and often in cases they didn't get married at all. And 20 years later, the parents who were looking for such Jewish pride from their doctor and lawyer children, sons and daughters, end up feeling somewhat deprived over the fact that their children never got married, or if they did, they didn't have children. If they did, it was to a non-Jewish spouse. And so in terms of family issues, there's no grandchildren, there's no family continuity. The family gets older and smaller until it falls apart and the family dies away. And sometimes people say, well, it's nice that you've become such a successful doctor, but couldn't you find a nice nurse or another Jewish doctor around the hospital to kind of have even just a relationship with? And it doesn't work. It doesn't happen. So that, there are a lot of different things in life, and every person has to, follow his or her calling. But, even if the religious lifestyle is strange and alien, doesn't seem to be the most admirable to many people, at least it has certain redeeming qualities. And over time, I found through experience that over time, families tend to appreciate that more and more than they do initially. So that's why it says here, it's an honor. Yeah, it's an honor to have children who go in the ways of the Torah. And this ultimately is very good for them. Yep. These children end up respecting the parents, bringing children into the world, grandchildren who love the grandparents and who the grandparents love to dote over. And therefore it's very good for them, not only in this, but also in the next. You have no greater embarrassment for a person than if his parents or his very close relatives, they're like wicked, nasty people. A person whose father, for example, is a thief, or he's transgressed serious transgressions and done all other types of publicly known misdeeds, he's very despicable, despised in the world's eyes. That's a horrible thing for other people to accept. All of his family members, all of his descendants are tainted by this person's misdeeds. They'll say, oh, he's or she's from such and such a family. Gam ba'ava novos bani mesim, and also through the transgressions of parents, children die. K'dichsiv, it says, poiked ovoin ovois al banim, God delivers the transgression of parents over their children, al shileshim, on the third generation, val rebeim, even on the fourth generation. There are different ways of explaining this because the Gemara discusses, another verse says that a person will not be punished because of the iniquity of his parents, so how to reconcile the difference. And there are different ways of reconciling it. But in any case, without going into too much detail, it's certainly true that the misdeeds of parents can be transmitted to their offspring. And therefore, it's very important for parents to know that their children are going in the right way. And children who go in the right way will become parents of good children. Do you have anything worse than a scenario where a person's kind of he's putting his own children to death because of his sin, because of his transgression? And I think of a modern day scenario of that. A person takes the responsibility to get married. And maybe they were not thinking as clearly as they should have been, and maybe they didn't have the values that they should have. But in the end of the day, they made the very serious decision to get married. In addition to that, they made the very serious decision, took their very great responsibility to have children. That person, whether he or she likes it or not, has made very grave decisions in life, which he or she is responsible for living up to. If in the workplace, or at the theater, or in the museum, or on the jog, or wherever path the person finds someone else that he or she is interested in, and will take the initiative to develop that relationship and enter into, what they call an affair. The person has children, which can end up breaking up a marriage. Right? That's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing. The person lived his life, he had the freedom and the liberty to decide whether to get married or not, and if so, to whom, but the decision's been made. The decision's been made not to have children. But if the decision was to have children, and then be presented with this opportunity of infidelity, and to capitalize on it, thinking that they're going to hold something back from their spouse or from the children, and they'll be able to live this type of dual lifestyle, that's a horrible crime. Because ultimately, it's going to affect the relationship, it's going to affect the marriage, very likely result in a divorce, and the children, they're blameless. And they're the ones who are going to have to suffer from all of this. So it's strange for us initially to think, well, a person's going to sin, and that sin is going to cause his children suffering. There's nothing more mean than that. Well, none of us would do that. But all of us probably know people who have been in the scenario that I'm discussing. Some of us might have even been products of that type of a scenario. Others know plenty of people, and it's the type of thing is rampant. And the poor children, why should they have to suffer because of people's irresponsible decisions? And therefore, this is just an example of how we should be thinking. Right? I have this opportunity, and this opportunity is not the best of opportunities. And I have the ability to refrain from making that decision. Should I give sway to my desires, to give sway to my emotions, and give in to that scenario, even though I'm compromising what's right, and I'm also going to be hurting other people, my spouse and my children? Or should I say no? I've made decisions that I've made. I'm in the boat. I'm in the bed. I'm in the bed that I've made. This is the boat that I'm in. And for better, for worse, this is the situation. This is a responsibility. So I won't. So I have to forgo that experience. So I have to forgo that opportunity. But that's a natural result of decisions that I've made in life. The poor children shouldn't have to suffer. And you have no one who has mercy over his children more so than the tzaddik. Why? Because the tzaddik is a righteous person. He's always going to be striving and very nearly always making the right and the righteous decisions. So a child who's born of such a parent or parents is always going to be reaping the fruits of righteousness, the decisions that are being made by righteous parents. oimed le'elef dor. And the merit of this person will stand for his descendants for 1,000 generations. Avram okad itzbeno. We know that Avram offered up Yitzchak as a sacrifice. V'nishba HaKadosh Baruch Hu liskor eschuso levona of the doridos, and God swore to remember this merit for generations upon generations. Ubasha shechatu Yisrael be'egel, and the time when the Jewish people transgressed with the golden calf. Omad Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom. Moshe stood and he said, "Betfilah v'amar, Zachor la'Avram liYitzchak liYisrael avadecha." Recall God, the righteousness, the merit of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob. V'chen Shlomo she'omar, and also King Solomon said, "Zochor lechazdei David avdecha." Remember God, the righteousness, the mercy, the piety of my father David. V'nanu, and they were answered. So you see, right? Being righteous is doing something very merciful for your children, for your offspring. We also recall regularly the merit of our forefathers. Therefore, should know, you have nobody who is more mean than people who are steeped in transgression. Why? Because they're only interested in gratifying their own needs and their own desires, and they're not interested and they don't care whatsoever about what type of negative ramifications that might have on other people. They don't care at all. Total self-interest. And that's what we're talking about here, being mean and cruel to other people. They have nothing more cruel than that. They give an analogy of a person who was on a ship, and the ship was crossing the sea, and there were other passengers on the boat, and as they're crossing the high seas, the other passengers started hearing banging and clanging and all types of noises from one of the cabins in the ship. And they notify the crew of the ship, and they go looking after these the banging, so forth and so on. They finally find that it's coming from a cabin at the bottom of the ship, a cabin which is hugging the hull of the ship. And they knock on the door, what's going on in there, and the person replies from inside, "Leave me alone. I'm in the privacy of my cabin. I can do whatever I want." But the banging and the clanging and the drilling continues until they get concerned. Something serious is going on there. So they break through the door, and they find the person's taking a hammer and an axe and everything else to the floor of his cabin. And they say to him, "Stop this immediately. What are you doing?" He said, "I'm pulling a hole in the bottom of my cabin, but I can do it. It's my cabin. I can do whatever I want." They said to him, "It might be the floor of your cabin, but it happens to be the hull of the ship. And if you put a hole through the floor of your cabin, you're going to sink us all." And the same thing here, in the analogy speaking, a person says, "Who are you to tell me what I have to do? In the privacy of my home, I do whatever I want." The answer is true. It's your own home. But if you put a hole in the floor and the walls of your own home, you actually sink the whole Jewish ship. Every single Jewish person has a collective responsibility to others to do things properly. And if a person doesn't care about the Jewish people, they don't care about what his or her actions have, the ramifications on the Jewish community, that's considered to be callous, insensitive. Does God really care whether I keep Shabbos, whether I keep kosher? And what is it if anybody's concerned what I do in my own home? The answer is it is. It's of God's concern what a person does. And a person can't claim to be independent of other people because we're all intertwined, one with the other. And we have a collective responsibility one with the other. The person is only interested in the way they view life, interested in fulfilling their own needs, their own desires, irrespective of what that has, what ramifications that has on other people. That's considered to be a form of meanness, of cruelty. And therefore we have to be constantly aware of how what we do and what we say affects other people for good or for bad. And furthermore, this baseless hatred, animosity, and competition between people, that was the cause for the destruction of the Second Temple. And all types of harmful, devastating things come into the world because of transgressions. Like our sages of blessed memory said, Ba'avoin chala ein bracha b'mechunas. Through the transgression of chala, meaning not taking a portion from the dough in order to give to the Kohen, ein bracha b'mechunas. There's no bracha in the produce that's been gathered in. Ba'ovan bidul truma u'masos, because of the transgression of not giving the portions of trumos and masos, which also are portions separated from produce, in order to give to the Kohen and the Levi. Hashamayim ne'etzarim, the heavens are shut up, and rain doesn't fall. Ba'ovan inui hadin, because of the transgression of perverting judgments. V'ivus adin, v'kilkul adin, v'ovan bidul Torah, Cherev ubiza rabba v'dever v'betzoros ba'al olam. Because of these things having to do with changing the judgment, manipulating the judgment, perverting the judgment, or transgressing by not learning Torah when a person has the opportunity. For all of these things, cherev, the sword, biza, plunder, great plunder, v'dever, and plague, and betzoros, which is drought, all of these things come to the world. So we don't realize this. But often when bad things happen, the non-Jews say it's the Jews' fault. And we Jews say anti-Semitism.
They're right.
But to a certain extent, they're right. To a certain extent, they're right. Bad things happen in the world when the Jews are not living up to what they're supposed to be doing. It's not only the Jews, non-Jews also have a responsibility to live ethically and upright. And therefore, when non-Jews are acting in an unethical way, that can also bring these things into the world. But we don't have to be concerned about pointing our fingers at the non-Jews. We have to be concerned about ourselves. Are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? Are we supposed to be doing? And we always have room for improvement. And therefore, the sages are telling us that even these difficult things, which seem to have nothing at all to do with living a religious lifestyle or not happen, the sages are telling us they do. There's a relationship. Say, for example, a person wants to be stingy and withhold the challah, the portion that you take away from dough, in order to give to the Kohen, for the purpose of keeping it for himself. The result is, we're told, that he's not going to have a bounty, and blessing in the produce that he's collected. He thinks he's going to be saving by keeping the challah with him so that he can eat. And the result of that is the food that he has stored for himself will not suffice. It will go off. It will become bad. Or, for example, he doesn't tithe off portions of the produce that he's supposed to give to others, thinking that he's going to somehow gain from that. The answer is the rains, right, will not fall. So there is some type of relationship with this here. If a person is perverting judgment, perverting justice, so then the laws of nature will also be perverted, so that drought and famine and plague will come. If a person doesn't learn Torah when he can, he has the opportunity, but he chooses not to. So that Torah is a way of establishing peace in the world. His negating the Torah is going to result in the sword passing through the world. So you find in all of these cases what we call midah k'meneged midah. There is a parallel kind of response to our shortcomings. And therefore, a person has to realize that anything he says, anything he does, or even on more subtly, anything he says, or even more subtle than that, anything that he thinks which is out of line, it's improper, it has an effect. It's like bringing negative energy into the world. It certainly makes sense regarding things that you do. When you do something negative, that action has negative repercussions, right? Just like you can move something with your hand, right? You can also move things by the power of speech, right? That was a very moving speech. What do you mean to say by that? That person's words were powerful. He used his power of speech to move you. And therefore we feel, right, emotionally uplifted, or we might feel unhappy, or we might feel any number of emotions on the gamut of emotions. In many ways, you can actually move a person verbally more so than physically. How much can you push a person? You can push him and push him and push him, but you can only push him so far. Yeah? You want to inspire him to do something. Yeah? Like going to the front lines. Well, you can push him and push him and push him, but you can only push him so far. How far you can push him? But if you have a fiery speech with impassioned words, and you through your words are able to kind of to commit people to the cause, you'll cause them to run of their own accord to the front line. right? That's how much much more powerful words are than actual physical things. The same thing with thoughts. Thoughts also have an effect in the world. You can actually affect other people's thoughts. You can affect other people. You can affect what happens in the world through your power of thoughts. When you think positively, that sends energy into the world, positive energy, which affects the world positively. And when you think negatively, right? When you think negatively, the same thing happens. So the person doesn't realize that, well, I'm not going to actually do that transgression, but there's nothing wrong with fantasizing about it. And who knows? Nobody's going to know about it. It's not going to affect anybody. That's not true. Right? Fantasizing something which is prohibited is just as bad as actually doing it on a certain level, even though you haven't done it, but it still affects the person himself negatively, and it's also going to affect the environment as well. So therefore, we have to start getting ourselves used to thinking about the fact that not only do we affect our environment in the things that we do, that's obvious, but certainly even in the things that we say, and also including the things that we think. It's important to guard ourselves on all of those levels. And then he says there are many such examples. Ube'emes, elu hagormim hapuronus, heim achzorim al atzmam, v'al b'nehem, v'al anshe doram. These people who live through wickedness cause this type of punishment. They are mean to themselves, they're mean to their children, and they're mean to the people of their generation, because they're causing these things to happen. The Tzaddikim, hem rachamim alehem, v'al b'nehem v'al doram. But the righteous people who are constantly weighing every deed, every word, every thought with the scales of righteousness and piety according to the will of God, they're actually being merciful upon themselves, upon their children, and upon the generation. Kidamrina, as it says, Shekol ha'olam nizon b'schus Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. The Gemara says that the entire world was sustained in the merit of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa was a very righteous, pious person, and in his merit, rains and bounty and blessing came upon the world. The Gemara happens to add there, even though he himself didn't derive very much benefit, he didn't use the benefit from this blessing that he brought to the world. He himself managed from week to week with a small amount of carobs. So he subsisted on very little, but in his merit, much bounty and blessing came for the rest of the world to subsist on. This is also a response to those poor people who say, how can we do any good for the world? We don't have the means at our disposal, being poor, to benefit the world in any way. We can't afford to give anything. Charity to the poor. We ourselves are poor and are reliant on charity. By the way, you often see, we were speaking not too long ago, I think, some of us about, people who collect money and charity, different types of people, and trying to gauge who they are, what their needs might be, how you should perhaps prioritize, who you should give, how much, to who and when and what circumstances and so on. We were talking, and if you remember, we were talking about a lot of scenarios which kind of get us upset. People who seem like they don't need, they shouldn't be asking, or they throw back at you what you give and stuff like that. But there's another category which we didn't discuss, which is people that are collecting, and then somebody else comes in collecting. They make a point of go over and giving that person part of what they themselves collected. You have those people too, right? So he's saying here, the poor people are collecting. How can they help? Well, one thing that comes to mind is that they can perhaps give a little bit of what they get. But that's not what he's getting at. He's going to say something else. By being righteous, they benefit the world. Ve'elu dvarim shel hevel, he says, this is ridiculous to make this claim. Because even a poor person who doesn't have any monetary wherewithal to benefit others, he can still benefit others by doing good deeds and through fulfilling of mitzvos. And by being careful to fulfill the will of God to the best of his ability. So when he does this, he's actually benefiting the world. According to this adds another level of intention of kavanah for us when we do our mitzvahs. Which is, not only am I doing God's will because I love him, but I'm doing God's will because I love the world. And this act of putting on tefillin is going to benefit the world. It's an act of charity that you're doing for the world. And in the merit of these good people and in the righteous, God is actually benevolent to the world and supports them. Hayesh tzedakah gedolim ezos. Do you have tzedakah which is better than this? And of course, this accepts, or this is based on the belief in God, the belief in God's desiring good and not bad, God's being aware of the fact that we do X, Y, or Z, and judging all of that. I mean, there's a lot of belief issues which are behind all of this. But if the starting point is that God exists, and God clearly defines good and bad, and God is aware of what we do, right and wrong, and God places here for the purpose of choosing what's beneficial and avoiding what's harmful, then right after all that, when a person is doing the right thing, it's appropriate for him or her to have in mind that he's doing so not to benefit himself. Remember, we spoke a while back about having the right intention, not to do it for the reward, even though that we know the reward is there, but to do it for God. Here he's adding another dimension. Not just doing it for God as opposed to doing it for yourself, but doing it for other people as opposed to doing it for yourself. In either case, you're going to benefit. Right? If you're doing it for God and not for yourself, ultimately you're going to benefit. You're going to get the reward, but we don't do it for the reward, we do it for God. And also, if you're doing it to improve the world, ultimately you're going to benefit from an improved world, but you don't do it for that purpose, you do it for the world. And a poor person can also give a little bit of charity. Maybe this would include the case that I was talking about. Even a poor person who's collecting can manage to give a little bit of what he's collected to another person who's collecting. Even if his whole livelihood comes from charity, his reward will be doubled. Because a little bit of what he has is equivalent to a lot of the wealthy. So if a wealthy person has $1 million and he gives $1,000, that's a lot. But what a percentage is that of his wealth? Yeah, okay, whatever. You know, I'm not so great at math. And then you have a poor person who's got 10 shekels, but he gives one. That's a tenth of his wealth. Even though he's giving $1,000 and he's only giving $1, but he's giving a tenth of his wealth and he's giving perhaps 100th. So that relative portion is taken into consideration. And so too the sages said, whether one gives a lot or whether one gives a little, the main thing is he should direct his heart towards his Father in heaven. Now, certainly from the context, what he's saying would imply is not that you have two wealthy people. Each one has the ability to give $1,000, and this one says, "I'll give 1,000," and this one says, "I'm only going to give 100, even though I can afford to give 1,000." Because the sages say, whether you give a lot or whether you give a little, the main thing is that you should intend to do your Father's will in heaven. Certainly from the context, that's not what he's talking about. What he's talking about is whether it's a lot, that's how much you can afford, or whether it's a little, because that's all you can afford. The main thing is, even if you're only giving a little bit, but that's what you can afford to give, the main thing is that you should be directing your heart towards heaven, right? That's an important point. It's not like, well, I can learn a lot or I can learn a little. And the sages say, whether it's a lot or a little, the main thing is you have the right intention. That's not the point. You learn as much as you can. The point is, this principle applies across the board. Now I'm applying it to learning. Certain people can have a lot of time to learn. Other people only have a very little bit of time to learn. So regarding that, the sage's statement here also applies. Whether it's a lot or whether it's a little, as long as you're maxing, as long as you're trying to do the most you can. Even if quantitatively that's very little, but qualitatively, since you're maxing, qualitatively, that's a lot. And therefore, Hashem judges each person, right, not so much on what they give, but what percentage of what they give. But what percentage is that of what they have to give? And I'm not about money. I'm talking about giving whatever it may be. Giving of money, or giving of time, or giving of your heart, or giving of intention. Whatever it is that you're able to give, right, you should be working at maxing. For one person, that might be 30%. Another person might max somewhere at 70%. Right? But a person who can give 70% and he's only giving 30% is much less than a person. How much did I say? He can give 7, he's giving 30. I have another person who can, I don't know, give 40, and he's only giving, and he's giving 20%, but he's giving half of what he got. So he's working on a higher threshold than the other person. One person might be more academic and intellectual and can focus on, let's say, learning in more depth for a longer period of time. And another person might not be as intelligent or might not be as academic or intellectual, but he still makes an effort to put in what he can. So the one person might be putting in 4 or 5 hours of learning, and the other is only putting in 2. But the one might be able to go for 10, and the other can only go for 3. So he's putting in 75% or whatever it is, 66% of what he can do. He's operating on a much higher level than the first person. Yeah.